Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm great.
Excellent.
Fantastic. What are you
I'm doing very well. I'm doing great. I am.
Oh, that's what you're waiting for. I was still thinking of different ways that I'm feeling at the moment.
I got you.
How are
Oh, yeah, no, it's all good. I'm doing my thing, yeah.
Okay.
So look, we are living in a time where we hear more and more in the various aspects of society, this phrase of diversity, inclusion, equity, so on and so forth. What comes to mind when you think about these things?
Sometimes it's just a matter of having a variety of people in the room, meaning like if you're in a room full of people, not only seeing one thing. That's what I think of when I think of diversity. Having a variety of people represented in various rooms, spaces, venues, etc.
Interesting.
What do you think about when you think of diversity?
You know I'm a hater.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I think of wordplay.
Okay.
You know, I think it's lip service.
You think inclusion is lip service?
Inclusion, diversity, it's all
How
very
so?
surface level. So, you know, one of the big pushes, right, seeing coming out of, JFK really came up with this idea of affirmative action. Right? And then over the course of the 70s and 80s, it really started to take hold in education and industry. And if you look into it, it's actually really interesting that the development of affirmative action played out very differently in those two spheres.
Okay.
But what I always thought was so fascinating was in the 90s when I was growing up, you'd see all these angry white people on TV talking about affirmative action. They're underqualified and they get access that we don't have. This is not fair.
Right.
But statistically, the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action programs were white women.
Right.
Right.
And still to this day.
And still to this day.
Right.
So when we say this diversity, inclusion, these are all updated titles of affirmative action, which to me was always masquerading as something that it wasn't. It was a way to reaffirm.
So do you think having more of us present in these different rooms and being able to be present in these different rooms is just a mask for we're throwing you a bone? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because presence does not actually equate to power, and that's always more interesting to me. We're not asking who are these people that are there, because it really falls into that old trope that all black people are the same. So we could just pick any one of y'all, throw you in a room, and have you be representative of.
Well, we know that's not true.
We know that's not true. This is what we'll be talking about today, particularly about what is real diversity in higher education. We're joined by Dr. Terry Nance, an old friend of the show, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at Villanova University. So we'll be back with Dr. Terry Nance on 28 Days and Beyond. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We're joined now by our old friend, Dr. Terry Nance.
Good to be here.
Yeah,
so good to see you both.
So let's just jump right in.
I'm ready.
What is real diversity?
She said, I'm ready.
I am ready. Because I've been at Villanova, as I just told you, for 41 years. And so there are many times when people called me, oh, you're the diversity hire, or you're the diversity candidate.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, did you write my dissertation?
Right.
Have you done my research?
Yeah.
I have every right to be here as much as you did, as much as you do. And so that I think from the very beginning, anybody, any of us who are at predominantly white institution, which we're not going to call a PWI, any of us who are at a PWI, and you know this, we are fighting all the time, for our recognition. And I think I could go off right now and talk about how that fight for our own dignity actually takes mental time away from us doing as well as we need to.
So when they say you're not publishing at the rate that you're supposed to, or what, it's because you're,
It's because this is hand to goodness truth. I was on campus for 2 days, and a wonderful gentleman came in my office and said, can't you please be head of this new organization we just started called the Black Cultural Society? And now you would say, okay, which is now called BSU. I know this. But the thing about it is that you go, oh, well, what does a moderator do?
No.
Well, because this moderator had to fight every time they wanted to get a room, had to fight anytime they needed to get any funds.
You had to be their therapist, their counselor,
I was in communication, and I'm advising people in engineering who came by to see me.
That's
so that I think at that time, now we're talking late 70s, early 80s, the idea was, let's just get the select few in, you know, the ones with the real credentials. And then, but there was no environment to flourish. And I will tell you, hand to goodness, I saw that you had the wonderful Magan Keita on your show previously. And Magan Keita, before he came to university, he had asked his advisor, should I go to Villanova? His advisor says, well, I don't know if there are any black people there. Turns out his advisor's wife was my mentor. So what's my whole point here? I had no mentors here at Villanova. I had to go to a professional association. The wonderful colleagues at Howard literally took it on as their responsibility to mentor those of us who were in outposts, shall we say.
So that's one of the things Amari and I have discussed pretty frequently, which is, you know, this idea of inclusion, right? Or representation matters, all these things, right? And Amari's, I don't want to speak for you,
well,
but
let's see if you hear what I be saying. What I'm saying.
I know you will correct her. Go ahead.
But, you know, just this idea that it's not just enough to have people in the rooms if they're not doing the work to actually make the progress. And I agree with that. I also agree that diversity and inclusion does matter, because it does matter to be able to see yourself represented and to see yourself in these rooms. When you look around and you're the only person there, that puts an additional weight on your shoulders.
I'm holding myself back.
All right.
Go on.
Let me tell you, that is what used to make me so angry.
What's that?
Because we would take these kids in, and they were good kids. They were at the top of their classes. And the thing we would do is we would put them in there, we would put them into our general classes, and we'd say, well, just do the work. You're supposed to be good. You're supposed to be at the top of your field. And then we would wash them out and say, well, see, we gave you a chance. That is a lie. And I think that's what really got my passion up. So so my service began to take a bigger and bigger hunk of my time. That's another whole thing, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Because inclusion is just, I'm going to say that's not even inclusion. That is what I would call equality. Equality is I let everybody in the door in the same way. Well, let's look at the funding that goes to those suburban schools and to the independent schools that's not going to the public schools. Now, we could talk about school choice, but that's not the topic for today.
Yeah, it's a totally different topic.
But here is why that's so disingenuous. Those children, those young people, those 12th graders did, through all those grades, did absolutely everything the school had to ask them to do. And they did more.
And that is a big difference between inclusion and equality. But we're going to hold right there because we have to take a break, Dr. Nance. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond right after this.
We're back with Dr. Terry Nance. Let's go.
All right. So the issue is not even letting people in or even saying, well, okay, we're going to have a multicultural affairs center for you. And I will tell you, when I left my department, communication, which is an awesome department, and I would only have left it for this reason. And they said, you know, create this multicultural affairs center. And as God is my witness, the first purpose of the multicultural affairs center was to provide a place for students of color to go. Well, I was in that job for about, I'd say 2 months before it hit me, like, these students just didn't come here to sit in my center. They came here to get an education.
Right.
So with the help of an incredible group of dynamic women, we transformed that into a retention center. Now, again, I'm in communication. I'm studying rhetoric, which we've talked about before, right? I didn't know anything about this, so I had to take a deep dive and had to learn that there are very much established ways that we can bring students up to the ways in which in a way that we know that they can compete, because that's the deal. It's not just to get into the school. It's to thrive.
Right.
When we were in the center, we used to say we did 4 things. We recruited, we retained, we graduated, and we graduated happy. Because graduating happy is not graduating, but it means that you had the ability to obtain everything the university had to offer, and you're set up for your next step. When we were talking about diversity back in the day, and unfortunately this is still true at too many universities, it was let's just get them in the door and you're on your own. That is not adequate. Any university, any university that takes these students in is not just bound by diversity and inclusion, but must also be bound by equity. And equity means that I give you what you need in order to succeed.
So how does that play itself out practically? What are
I
some
will
concrete
tell
examples?
you, it plays it out in this way. When at our center, we had pre-college programs. Now, when I first came, can you imagine this? We had a program that was really based initially on economic level, and we said, you can come to Villanova for this program, but we're not going to give you lunch, and you got to pay, and you got to pay your fare to get here.
So
We were able to
Yeah.
So we transformed that program. Now it is a 5-week residential program.
Okay.
Then we also realized that we also have some great kids here, but they need a little head start. So we came up with another program. So now we have 2 pre-college programs, but that's still not enough. Remember, we really introduced into this university the idea of retention.
Yeah.
Retention is not advising.
Right.
Advising is get me into that class, please,
Yeah.
and make sure it's not at 8:30.
Yeah.
Right? That's not enough.
Yeah.
That's not enough. Our retention folk first ask you, how's your money? How you feeling? How's your roommate? Now let's talk about your grades.
Okay.
Because if those other 3 things aren't taken care of,
It's
then you're not going to be able to focus on your grades.
Right.
And I have to tell you, and it was wonderful that I did that work. And as you announced, Amari, I am now the Chief Diversity Officer. I'm now at another level. So now I'm asking the question, why are we asking the students to do all the change? What about the institution?
Right.
How should the institution change to accommodate the difference that we're recruiting? Because you understand, diversity and inclusion is not just about saying, oh, we have these pretty brown ones here.
Right.
It's pretty brown. You know,
They've come
they
from
look-
all over.
and they look
Yeah.
so pretty. An institution is not diverse unless it has taken in and taken advantage of the incredible diversity that's there. When I look at these masks are art. They should be taught in our fundamental art classes, right? This style, the color, all of this. And this is a part of the way in which we actually improve the educational product that we deliver. That by taking new people, by incorporating diverse people into the university, they bring with them different cultures, different experiences. We should learn about them.
Absolutely.
We should make them a part of what we consider our baseline of information. So that's the way in which institutions have to change. And we also need to be aware of people's money.
That's a
Now, we all,
whole
I know
other
that's a
conversation,
whole
Dr.
other,
Nance.
I know that's right. But we have to
Wow.
recognize that one package is not going to be the same thing
For
for
everybody.
everybody. So that I give you your tuition, I give you your room, I give you your board. So we're finished. You don't need any other money.
As always, Dr. Nance, we don't have enough time to get into
talk about
all
it
of the
further,
things with you.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you very much.
As always.
I didn't think I had anything to say.
You had all the things to say. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond right after this.
And we're back on 28 Days and Beyond. Charisma.
So much passion with
Yeah,
Dr.
Dr. Nance, I mean, it's always a good time. She has a wealth of experience,
Yes, she
a wealth
does.
of knowledge, and a wealth of wisdom. What are some of the things that you took away?
One of the most powerful things I think she said was this idea of inclusion versus equality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Leveling the playing field. And you can't just throw a bunch of people in a scenario and say, okay, now go. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's
Yeah.
not, you know, a one-stop shop for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I believe her when, you know, she is doing work
She's doing the
towards
work.
those ends.
Yeah.
But she's also acknowledged that that's not generally the case. You know what I
done,
mean? And
yeah.
that's where my skepticism comes.
It's like when you have, I said this off camera, but it's like when you have the universities, it's time to do the brochure to promote, and then
they'll
it's
go.
like they'll go and get like,
Yep.
you know, so it's like,
Yep.
oh, this is how much diversity we have on our
Exactly.
campus. Meanwhile, it's literally like 3 people.
Yep. Yeah. 2 of those people graduated. The third
Yeah.
one. Yeah. Anyway, I think that this is something else she mentioned. She was like, "Oh, do you have the money?" Right?
Yeah.
Because schools are getting more and more expensive.
It's egregious.
So
how much
I'm
it
really
costs
wondering
to be
like
educated.
because then it, which is a conversation we perhaps have on a different show, but then it begs the question of like, you know, is a college education worth the price of the ticket?
Well, I've heard people say now that college is almost looked at as like a high school degree was at one point. You know what I mean? Like it's not even something that you do. Granted, we still consider college and education on a collegiate level to be higher education, but at the same time, it's almost a requirement at this point for you to. You think about all the people that are literally making minimum wage or barely able to make it above the poverty line who have college degrees.
Yeah, but you know what though? There was a series of articles that came out a few years ago that was talking about PhDs who are on public assistance for their food stamps. So even that, and the reason I say that is because the rising cost of education means, because this is the thinking, I'm going to college to be able to get a job to set my life up. But what ends up happening is the cost of college is so much, you get a job to pay your student loans off.
Don't even get me started on student loans.
Yo, but that's what I'm saying. So, you know, so there's the whole question of what is, and that's why she said, are you graduating happy?
Right.
What is the experience while you're having there? But also, what are you getting yourself into in the long run where you'll spend the next 30 or 40 years paying off money for a degree that statistically you may or may not even use?
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's going to have to be for another episode. This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.
Peace.